My name is Maya Hart. I'm 29 years old. I've paid someone else's mortgage for almost a year. And last month, they changed the locks while I was at work. No warning. No text. Just 3 trash bags on the porch. One of them had my winter coat inside. I wasn't broke. I wasn't unemployed. I wasn't a failure. I was just convenient. The one who had savings. The one who understood. The one who didn't complain. Until she did. But here's the thing about being the reliable one. Once they realize you'll sacrifice everything, they stop pretending to protect anything. Today, I'm sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment with crooked cabinets, a half-working dryer, and more peace than I've had in years. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss the guilt. I miss the version of me that stayed quiet to keep the family calm. But she's gone now. And what came after is finally mine. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever been the one who gave everything until there was nothing left, stay. Because this story isn't about revenge. It's about release. It was already dark out when I stepped into my coat, the click of the front door behind me feeling heavier than usual. My apartment had been unusually quiet that night. Just me, leftover pad thai, and Zillow listings open in another tab. I'd been obsessing over them for months. Tiny 2-bedroom units in Logan Square, maybe a fixer-upper in Avondale. Nothing fancy, but it would be mine. After rent and groceries, every extra cent I made went into that down payment fund. I wasn't rich, just disciplined. But somehow, in my family's eyes, that made me different. That made me responsible. The drive from downtown to Plainfield took nearly an hour. I didn't even have the radio on. It was May, and the air still carried that damp spring chill that made everything feel unsettled. I pulled into the driveway, noticing right away how dim the porch light had become. Like even the house was tired. Mom was waiting inside, arms outstretched, her perfume as overwhelming as ever. "You made it," she said. Her hug lingered too long. "What's going on?" I asked, scanning the living room. Dad was slumped in his recliner, the TV flickering some muted sitcom. He didn't even turn his head. That wasn't a good sign. Mom led me to the kitchen like it was a stage and we were about to perform. "Your father got let go. Last week," she said, as if letting the words out was like opening a wound. I looked toward Dad, but he avoided my eyes. "I'm sorry. Are you okay?" I asked him. He gave a small nod. No words. "And my back's gotten worse," Mom continued, placing a hand on her lower spine like she needed proof. "I can barely move most mornings." I waited. I could feel the ask building behind every sigh. "We've fallen behind," she said finally. "On the mortgage, utilities too." My fingers instinctively curled around the strap of my purse. "How far behind?" She hesitated. "Almost 3 months." Silence stretched between us. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "We didn't want to worry you," she said, managing to sound both noble and manipulative in the same breath. "But we really need help, just for a while. A few months, maybe." "How much is the mortgage?" Mom exchanged a glance with Dad. $1,800 a month. That familiar swell of pressure gathered behind my ribs. $1,800 wasn't an impossible amount, once. But monthly? With what I made? That was a second household. That was my savings plan in a coma. "We'd pay you back," she added too quickly, like it was rehearsed. I opened my phone, pulling up my bank app. $50,342. That was my home fund. Untouched. Sacred. I could cover them for now. But at what cost? I stared at the kitchen table. The same table where I once did my algebra homework, where we had Thanksgiving dinners. It had new scratches now, and a stack of unopened mail sitting at the edge. I pulled out my checkbook. "I can cover the mortgage," I said, my voice even. "Temporarily." Mom's face cracked into a smile that was half relief, half victory. Thank you, sweetheart. You're our anchor. We always said you had the head on your shoulders. I didn't reply. I just wrote the check. May's payment. Then I flipped to the next page and penciled in a reminder for June. Dad mumbled, "Thanks, Maya," without lifting his eyes. The whole house seemed to exhale. But I couldn't. On the drive back, headlights blurred on the expressway, and the city lights began to reappear. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was from Mom. "Thank you, baby. We knew we could count on you." Something about the "we" stings more than it should. I gave up my apartment to save rent. In return, I got downgraded to a twin bed and zero boundaries. The plan, if you could even call it that, was temporary. A stopgap. I'd sublet my apartment in the city, boxed up everything I owned, and moved back to Plainfield in a single weekend. My mom's tone had been laced with gratitude. "Just until we get back on our feet," she'd said, gently placing a hand on mine. That was in May. It was now September, and those feet? Still dangling, aimless, somewhere in the fog. The house smelled like stale coffee and anxiety. Every cabinet creaked. Every hallway echoed with someone's needs. There was no peace, no pause. My room, the one I'd grown up in, was now the smallest in the house, thanks to the arrival of Eric and Heather, who showed up one Friday without warning, toddler in tow and zero apologies. "We just need some time," Eric had said, like he'd invented the phrase. I hadn't even gotten a say. Mom had already washed the sheets and cleared out the guest room for them. By Sunday night, Heather had suggested, sweetly, like poison in honey, that the baby would sleep better if Maya wasn't in the bigger room right next to the nursery. And just like that, I was demoted. Again. I spent the next week bumping into sippy cups, folding laundry that wasn't mine, and dodging Heather's loaded comments. She never attacked directly. She preferred the art of implication. One morning over breakfast, she gestured to my work laptop and said, "Must be nice working from home. I guess some people had the luxury of finishing college." I didn't respond. I just poured more coffee and stared at the wall. Heather's things were everywhere. Designer diaper bags, a stack of high-end skincare products crowding the bathroom sink. Her nails were always fresh, her brows microbladed. Yet she hadn't had a job in 2 years. I started doing the math in my head. Where was the money coming from? Then I remembered. Me. Every month I covered the mortgage. Groceries, utilities. Once I paid the electric bill because the lights had been flickering and Mom mentioned it offhand like it was my turn. One evening, as I was folding a pile of clothes that included tiny jeans and sequined leggings that clearly belonged to Heather, I heard murmuring through the paper-thin wall. "She's not going to last," Heather said, her voice edged with certainty. "Let her go if she can't handle it." I froze. Eric replied, something unintelligible, but the tone was dismissive. Dismissive of me. I dropped the laundry mid-fold and stepped quietly into my room. My twin bed felt even smaller that night, the blanket tighter around my chest. I reached for my phone and pulled up my bank app. $32,084. That's what I had left, down from $50,000 in just 4 months. I stared at the number, watching the little refresh icon spin. I wasn't just helping anymore. I was financing something I didn't understand. Something that didn't feel like family. Something that felt like a trap. I thought peace cost money. Turns out it costs silence, and I was running out of both. Thanksgiving week arrived cloaked in brittle smiles and the smell of overcooked turkey. Outside, the air had turned sharp, leaves spinning down like little red warnings. Inside, tension slithered beneath every word, every glance. No one said anything directly, but it was all there. In the sighs, the way chairs scraped louder than needed, how Heather's heels clicked defiantly across the hardwood like she owned it. My dad used to say, "Family means you do what it takes." I just hadn't realized the unspoken part of that sentence. I was the you, the one doing, the one giving. And today, I was done. It started with a handbag. Heather breezed through the front door like a Macy's catalog exploded on her. Her nails glinted. Her lashes curled unnaturally skyward. But it was the bag slung over her shoulder. Smooth leather, unmistakably designer, that made my stomach turn. I was in the kitchen sorting grocery receipts when I saw it. "New bag?" I asked, forcing evenness into my tone. She glanced at me with a smile so tight it could cut glass. "It's none of your business what I bought." Ron sat at the table, staring into his coffee like it held answers. Janice stirred the gravy. Neither of them said a word. I kept my voice steady. "We just bought groceries yesterday." I covered it. Again. Heather shrugged. "And?" I dropped the receipts and walked out. That night at dinner, the air was thick with gravy and denial. My plate sat barely touched. I pushed peas around while Noah giggled at mashed potatoes. Eric was talking about a game on TV, but I wasn't listening. My head buzzed with numbers, resentment, exhaustion. "I'd like to talk about groceries," I said, cutting through the noise. 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. I can't keep doing this alone. Groceries, bills, everything. If we're all eating, we should all contribute. Eric blinked. "What's your problem?" "You make good money." Heather didn't miss a beat. "Yeah, don't be greedy." "Greedy?" I repeated, stunned. "You act like we're living off you," she snapped. "You are," I said, voice rising. "I pay the mortgage, the electric, the gas. I bought your son a car seat last month." Janice cleared her throat. "Maya, not at the table. Don't ruin the family mood." And that was it. The moment the dam cracked. I stood up, heart pounding. "I'm not your ATM. I'm not your maid. I'm your daughter, and I'm drowning." Silence followed. Not stunned silence, just avoidance. Ron sipped his wine. Heather rolled her eyes. Eric looked down at his plate. I walked away before they could pretend I'd overreacted. In my room, I grabbed my notebook and started listing every expense I'd covered since May. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, diapers, repairs, interest-free loans that never returned. By the end of it, the total made my stomach lurch. My savings had shrunk to $25,200. I barely slept. At 7:42 a.m., a knock tapped against my door like a loaded pistol. Janice's voice was calm. Too calm. "Family meeting tomorrow morning? We've all decided." "We've been talking," Mom said, eyes bright. "And we think it's time the family takes a real vacation. Hawaii, maybe?" I blinked at her across the living room, where sunlight slanted too warmly on faces I could barely stand to look at anymore. Ron was on the recliner, thumbing absently through a TV remote he hadn't used in months. Heather perched on the couch armrest like she owned the place, a stack of glossy travel brochures beside her. Eric had a laptop open, tropical images scrolling like taunts. And Noah was playing with Legos on the rug, his tiny world far safer than mine. Thanksgiving had been 2 weeks ago. It ended in shouting, slammed doors, and the first moment I dared to say aloud what I'd only whispered inside. I was being used. I thought that would have scared them, shamed them. Instead, it seemed to have only emboldened them. Mom beamed. "We thought it would be good for everyone. Some healing time." My voice came out flat. "Hawaii?" "We found a great group package," Eric added. "Flights, hotel, even excursions. 12 grand for all of us. Pretty reasonable." "Reasonable for who?" I asked. Ron didn't even look up. Heather twirled her hair, smiling faintly. "You still have your savings, right? That 50 grand? You said it was just sitting there." I felt my jaw clench. Janice leaned forward. "Honey, you haven't used it. And it's not like we ask for much." I laughed, but it came out dry. "You've asked for mortgage payments, groceries, Noah's school fees, gas, diapers, utilities, and now, a beach vacation?" Heather crossed her arms. "You're so obsessed with control. It's money. We're family." "It's my money," I said quietly. And this isn't about bonding. This is a test. Janice's smile stiffened. Maybe some time away from this house will help you remember what family means. Or maybe, I said, standing, this is exactly what made me forget. No one stopped me as I walked out. They never did. That night, work kept me late. It was dark by the time I pulled into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the front porch like searchlights. Something was wrong even before I stepped out of the car. My key didn't fit. I tried again. Slower, same result. I rang the bell. No one answered. That's when I noticed the bags. 3 black trash bags slumped beside the door. One had a tear and a familiar sleeve stuck out. My winter coat. No note, no text. Just garbage bags. I stood there, cold settling into my spine. I knocked again. Then harder. No answer. I reached for my phone, hands shaking. The call to Janice went straight to voicemail. I didn't try a second time. Instead, I tapped into my contacts and hit Lauren's name. My best friend since college. The one who warned me months ago. They'll take everything if you let them. The line picked up on the second ring. Still have that guest room? I asked. She didn't hesitate. You're already on the lease. Get here. I slid into my car, reverse lights flooding the bags that used to be my life. Behind me, the house stayed dark. The first text came the next morning. Mortgage is due. Please send your usual. I stared at the glowing screen from Lauren's guest bed, a cup of coffee cooling in my hand. The audacity was almost laughable. They'd kicked me out, locked me out, less than 12 hours ago. And yet here it was. The same expectation, as if the betrayal hadn't happened, as if my bank account were still open for business. I didn't reply. I didn't even sigh. I just deleted the message. A minute later, another ping. Janice, you're still part of this family. Families work through things. Then, it's Christmas. Don't be cruel. Cruel. That word landed strangely. Cruel was sealing the locks while I was gone. Cruel was bagging my life in plastic and leaving it out in the cold. Cruel was expecting me to bankroll their dysfunction while they shut me out like a stranger. I blocked her number. Then Eric's. Then Heather's. I unfollowed every one of them on social media, one by one, until my feed was finally silent. It was the quietest it had been in months, and it felt clean. Lauren peeked into the room, her arms full of moving boxes. You okay? I nodded. Getting there. Over the next week, she helped me move into a small but bright one-bedroom apartment on the north side. Hardwood floors, slightly crooked cabinets, a washer-dryer combo that made threatening sounds if you ran both at once. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every inch of it was earned. We celebrated move-in day with Thai takeout and folding chairs, laughing as we used my laptop box as a table. Lauren toasted with a Diet Coke. To walls that are yours and locks that you own. I grinned and tapped my can against hers. Later that night, alone in my new living room, I opened my savings app for the first time in weeks. $24,387. Still standing. I sat back against the wall and let the number wash over me. For the first time in a year, I wasn't afraid to look. I wasn't afraid of the next text, the next ask, the next hole I'd be expected to fill, because they couldn't reach me anymore. I wasn't just out. I was done. 3 days before Christmas, my phone rang again. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. I played it on speaker. Maya? Hey, it's Alyssa. Your cousin. I didn't know if you changed your number or just blocked everyone. Honestly? Good call. A pause. A breath. They're scrambling. Your dad's working 2 jobs. Eric finally got hired at some warehouse in Joliet. They're calling you selfish, but they're surviving. I listened to the silence that followed, then pressed delete. Surviving. So was I. Christmas morning, no texts, no calls. Just me, my coffee, and my favorite playlist. Peace feels strange, but real. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft murmur of Ella Fitzgerald floating from the Bluetooth speaker. The tree in the corner barely grazed 4 feet, draped in dollar store ornaments and a single strand of warm white lights. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every corner of this space hummed with calm, the kind I never knew I needed until I finally had it. Last year, this day had meant early cooking, last-minute gift wrapping, and biting my tongue through backhanded comments. I'd counted grocery receipts and kept tally of who needed what, how much I had left, and what corners I could cut. This year, the only thing I had to count was how many sugar cubes I wanted in my coffee. I sipped slowly and watched sunlight edge across the hardwood. No obligations, no expectations, just the quiet rhythm of a life I had finally claimed. Lauren knocked gently and peeked her head in. "Merry Christmas?" she said, still in her pajama pants and fuzzy socks. "Merry Christmas," I replied, smiling. "Want pancakes?" "I thought you'd never ask." We cooked with music playing and the windows cracked open, letting in cold air that smelled like fresh beginnings. We didn't need presents. We had boundaries. We had space. We had dignity. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed. Janice. I didn't open the message. The preview read, "Come back, let's talk." I locked the screen and slid the phone into a drawer without a second thought. Later, over coffee and leftover Thai food, I got another call. Alyssa, my cousin. "They're different this year," she said cautiously. "Heather sold a bunch of her bags online. Eric's still working nights. Your mom looks tired." "Are they okay?" I asked, genuinely curious. "They're functioning," Alyssa replied. "No more steak dinners, no more spa days, but yeah, they're alive." I didn't feel glee, not even vindication, just clarity. They were always capable, they just never wanted to be until they had no choice. I looked around at my modest tree, my warm apartment, the bank app on my laptop quietly waiting to confirm my progress. My savings had bounced back. $26,540. I was rebuilding, bit by bit. But more importantly, I wasn't bleeding anymore. I whispered, barely audible to anyone but myself. They taught me to choose them over me. I finally chose me. The words hung in the air, light and sharp as frost. I opened my laptop, typed in the address I'd been saving for months, and clicked on the newest listing. A 2-bedroom condo on the edge of Ravenswood. Quiet street, exposed brick, sunlight in every room, scheduled tour. I hit the button and closed the lid. I wasn't going back. I wasn't angry. I was just done. And finally, free. I used to believe that silence was safe, that biting my tongue kept the peace, that swallowing discomfort made me stronger. But peace, it turns out, shouldn't cost your voice. And strength? It doesn't look like sacrificing yourself over and over for people who never intended to protect you. The day they changed the locks and left my life in trash bags was the day I realized I'd never belonged there in the first place. I wasn't the daughter they loved. I was the asset they drained. The one who paid the mortgage, bought the groceries, covered the utilities, and still somehow owed them more. More patience, more money, more silence. But I ran out. And what came after wasn't rage. It was clarity. It began in small ways. I stopped replying to texts designed to guilt me into obedience. I let phone calls ring until they turned to missed opportunities. I blocked numbers without apology. Every act of disconnection felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place, slowly building the outline of a life that finally belonged to me. I moved into a smaller apartment, but my spirit had more room to breathe. I cooked for one, but ate without resentment. I bought nothing extravagant, but every dollar I kept was a quiet declaration. I no longer bleed for you. There were nights when I second-guessed myself. Memories clawed back. Birthday cakes, road trips, the few soft hugs I could still remember. But then I'd recall the sneer in Heather's voice when she said I was obsessed with control, or the time my mom asked for $12,000 for a vacation right after accusing me of being selfish. And the way my father stood there, eyes averted, letting it all happen. Those weren't lapses in judgment. They were patterns, and I was done participating. It didn't take long for them to start circling back. First, it was just checking in. Then, we're worried about you. Then, you can't just abandon your family. The irony stung. They had abandoned me the moment I stopped being useful. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Lauren was the one who kept me grounded, reminding me that boundaries aren't betrayals, that love without respect is manipulation dressed in Sunday best. Her guest room became my sanctuary, and her friendship, the net that caught me mid-fall. With her help, I started over. I reclaimed my money, my mind, my mornings. Christmas morning was quiet. No flurry of demands, no errands, just coffee, sunlight, and silence. This time on my terms. That's when I knew I had already won. Not because I ruined them or watched them beg, but because I didn't need to. I had become someone they could no longer touch. Someone they no longer owned with guilt. Someone they had underestimated and lost. And perhaps that was the true revenge. She had been the giver, the peacekeeper, the one who stayed quiet so others could stay comfortable. For years, they mistook her kindness for currency and her sacrifice for submission. They believed she was theirs to spend, until she finally walked away. The moment she chose herself over their expectations, the balance of power shifted. They, who once depended on her, learned how to survive without her. And she, who once bent over backwards, found how it felt to stand tall. Justice didn't come with apologies or reconciliations. It came with distance. With the quiet clicking of a locked door. With a woman staring at her savings account, no longer fearing its depletion, but trusting in its purpose. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Because when truth stands its ground, even the loudest lies crumble. And sometimes the sharpest act of defiance is walking away without ever looking back. If you've ever kept the lights on for people who left you in the dark, if you've ever been the backbone of a house that never had your back, then you already know. Walking away isn't cruel. Staying just to be drained is. You don't owe anyone your peace. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally understand what it costs to stay silent. Leave a comment if you've ever had to choose between survival and being the good one. Hit subscribe if you're building something that's finally yours. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever say is nothing at all. My name is Autumn Carter. I'm a trauma nurse, a survivor. And for 28 years, I was also the family assistant. Invisible, but always on call. I cooked the meals. I remembered the allergies. I cleaned the windows they never looked through. And when a truck crushed my car into twisted steel, my mother didn't come to the hospital. She said I'd always wanted independence, so I gave it to myself. I didn't rebuild out of revenge. I rebuilt because silence almost killed me. And I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Today I'm sitting beside a bookshelf my father built with his own hands, after learning the truth. I'm not the daughter they claimed. I'm the daughter they lost when I finally chose myself. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever carried a family on your back, only to realize they never saw you, stay a while. This story was made for you. Rain streaked down the kitchen window like silent accusations, smearing the faint light of a gray November morning. I had barely stepped out of my scrubs when the call came. No. How are you? No. Did you sleep? Just another list. Another obligation. I stared at my phone screen a second longer than usual before slipping it into my pocket, already knowing I'd comply. Again. The apartment smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt toast, a side effect of surviving night shifts and not bothering to cook. 12 hours on my feet in the ER, barely a moment to sit. And now I was digging through my cluttered fridge to see if I had anything salvageable for a cheese board. Of course I didn't. Of course I'd go out. I told myself I could rest tomorrow, but I always told myself that. Tomorrow never came. Fairmount was only 15 minutes away, but I drove slowly, watching the windshield wipers fight the rain with rhythmic futility. Susan's townhouse was nestled on a corner lot, pristine like a picture in a home magazine. It had always been her pride and joy. Immaculate, curated, performative. Unlike me. I carried the groceries up the slick stone steps, my fingers numbing around the cold paper bags. No one opened the door. I had the spare key, of course. I always did. The house was quiet, untouched. They weren't even here yet. I sighed, set the wine on the counter, and started prepping like a ghost in my mother's house. The flowers came out of their plastic wrap, roses and baby's breath. Safe, non-daisy,